Somebody asked me recently, how many hobbies do you actually have? I had to stop and count. I had to write them down. I have 15 active hobbies, and I'll get into that a little later. If you're interested, stick around. If you actually struggle with having any hobbies and have no idea what to do with your time, stick around to section 6 or jump to section 6 in the description. There's a link down there. So how many hobbies do I actually really have, and what are they? We'll get into that in a little bit more detail later on, but my number one hobby is learning. I love to learn. I've been called Curious George most of my life, even to the point where I've been getting gifts, Curious George, stuffed animals, things of that nature. That's actually why this channel is called Curious Kicks. Curiosity breeds learning, and learning does turn into hobbies, does turn into just things you're interested in. But that isn't really the question, is it? Is how many. It gets into really the quality of them and things of that nature. But also, as I thought more about this, I thought there's a difference between interests and hobbies. And I have a lot of things I'm interested in. I mean, like I said already, I'm curious about everything. And the difference, in my opinion, between an interest and a hobby is an interest is something that you dabble in. You might read about, you might watch 1 or a dozen YouTube videos on the topic. Pretty easy to binge watching in YouTube for sure. You might actually go to a seminar on the topic, things of that nature. You might read a book, right? Watch a magazine, or not watch a magazine, read a magazine. But you wouldn't necessarily miss it once you stop digging into it. I have lots of things that I found interesting, dug into, thinking they might become a hobby. And a hobby, on the other hand, is something you're invested in. It's something you actually allocate time, resources in terms of finances to it, space in your shop like this. And a big criteria is you'd miss it if you stopped doing it. If all of a sudden it disappeared, you definitely miss it. So I have a lot of things on my list that questionable whether they're really a hobby or something I'm interested in. But I would say most of them are in the category of hobby. As I said earlier, learning is my number one hobby. I love learning new things. And unfortunately, because I'm retired, now when I'm learning something, it can look a lot like a hobby. If you think of the hobby test as you have real time and money, space invested in it, it can look like a hobby. But realistically, for me, a lot of times getting into the hobby, learning about it, researching it, acquiring the things to be in the hobby, that actually was the hobby. And a good example for me, and I'll talk more about this in a bit, is reloading ammunition. I like going to the gun range, I like shooting, I like reloading, but do I like it enough? Now, that hobby's been abandoned and haven't done it for quite a while. So is it a hobby? Is it just an interest? I don't know the answer to that. As I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, when I got asked that question, how many hobbies I actually have, I had to sit down and write up a list. And once I saw the list was quite long, I decided that I was going to actually spend a little more energy on this topic. And I'll get to why in a little bit here, because it's caused me a little bit of stress, might be too strong of an emotion or word for it. But there was something to be unpacked here. Hence why I even decided to create a video on the topic. Can you have too many hobbies in retirement, or too many hobbies, period? But my list, I broke it up into 4 categories. Active hobbies, parked/occasional hobbies or seasonal hobbies, abandoned hobbies, which is the big topic I want to get into, and dropped hobbies. Hobbies that you basically consciously decided to leave. I'm going to put my hobbies on the screen really quickly here. Here's all my active hobbies, and I had so many in this list that I decided to separate those into major and minor. And no surprise that my number one hobby, as I really started thinking about this a lot more, is learning. And it's led to a lot of interesting challenges. The fact that learning I call a hobby, which I'll get to in a bit. Here's all my parked, seasonal / occasional hobbies. And as you can see, this list is kind of short. Maybe a few of my things should be on that list or should be on the abandoned list that come from the active. But like I said, I'm still working the list over. Now here's my abandoned hobbies. And these are the hobbies that I didn't make a conscious decision to stop doing. I didn't make a conscious decision to park them. I just stopped doing them. And I have time invested in these, money invested in these. Some of them maybe I could call occasional, like drones, I occasionally do. But there, usually the drone usually has some utility for me, like checking to see if I have leaves in the gutter. It's a pretty expensive way to check to see if you have leaves in your gutter. But I have a drone, so I probably wouldn't have bought one just to do that, just truth be told. But pickleball, I really got into pickleball. I'm all in or all out kind of guy. I was all into pickleball, so much so that that's all I did when I was in Florida, because when you play pickleball for 4 hours straight, when you're my age, or older probably, you don't do much the rest of the day. You sit around and try to rejuvenate. One that's on this list that really bothers me, actually probably two I would say, is guitar and ukulele. I really enjoy listening to guitar music. I enjoy the idea of being able to play the guitar well. It's taken a lot of time and energy for me. I have a guitar here, I have a guitar down in Florida. I have 2 or 3 ukuleles, and got really into that and haven't done that for a while either. So those are causing me some stress. And I would say one of the things that I need to spend time on is thinking about these abandoned hobbies and literally trying to make a conscious decision on, do I really want to keep that hobby around? Drones, for instance, I've already got the sunk cost into it. It's not taking up any mental bandwidth. When I don't do it, it doesn't bother me. But when I do need to do it, I still have the ability. However, guitars does cause me some stress. I have a lot of guitars laying around. Not a lot, I shouldn't say a lot. I have a lot of these instruments, but mentally it is causing me some stress. Mainly because I want to do it, but I'm not sure if I want to be a person who knows how to play the guitar or if I actually want to play the guitar. I know that's interesting. There's a friend of mine named Jamie Fingelstead that actually blogged about that quite a few years ago. He realized that he wanted guitar playing to be part of his personality. That's in the way he put it, but and it really caused me pause. Is that what I'm doing? Or do I really want to be able to play the guitar, or do I want to actually be able to say it, or not even say it, but just have the ability to play the guitar as part of my personality? Anyways, so I need to spend some time on these my abandoned list and really think about it. The drop list, I don't have any problem having drop lists. And I started doing research in this. I'm looking down at my notes because I really got into this topic. Can you have too many hobbies? Too many hobbies. But there's a lady out there named Barbara Scher. She wrote a book called Refuse to Choose. And she makes the case that it's okay to drop things. And she calls people like me, the serial hobbyists, if you want to call it that, she calls us scanners in her book. And I haven't read the entire book, but I think it'd be a great book to dig into more deeply. I think her take is more about careers and not having like one career that you're focused on like I was for my entire career. So where does the limit on how many hobbies you actually can have at one time come from? Is there really a limit? I actually think there is, but I think it's more related to than just the count, because I don't think the count matters, especially if you have hobbies that are in the different categories, such as parked or occasional, like I was mentioning with photography earlier. I think it actually has to do with how much simultaneous depth can you do? Like how deep can you go at any of the hobbies? And if you really think of your hobbies and think about how good you want to get at the hobby, or what level you want to achieve, what do you want to be able to accomplish? Like I want to do 50 quilts, if you're a quilter, for instance, or something of that nature, or want to be able to do this really complex type of woodworking that requires lots of practice. Those are good examples of things that do require time and investment. And can you do that across all of your hobbies? Because really when it comes down to time, the interesting thing about it being a retired person is that being retired removes the time scarcity that you had when you're working. When you're working, naturally time was scarce. And so therefore you didn't have as many hobbies. You definitely didn't have as many hobbies that you actually performed or tried to perform on a regular basis. So it really comes down to, do you have too many hobbies that cause you, or do you have so many hobbies that it causes you stress? Are you really financially strapped because you have too much invested in too many different hobbies? So there's really a dimension beyond just, do you have too many, right? Is it a count thing? I don't think it's a count thing. I think it's more individualized for you as a person. I know for me lately, as I mentioned before, if it made the cut, is that actually the abandoned category is really bothering me, right? It's not to have too many hobbies. And there actually is a few hobbies as well that are in the active category that I'm not able to do enough, or at least not deep enough into it. And I do find myself occasionally being jealous of people that say they have one hobby or maybe just a couple, and they get really good at it. Like a friend that I used to have before we moved, he was really into classical guitar. And I think that was pretty much his only hobby besides family time. And he got really good at it. And I'll never be that good at anything because I have too many hobbies for that. And so I think when you get right down to it, I think, like I said, it's really not the count of number of hobbies. It's really, are you able to spend as much time on each of them that you want to? And an honest assessment of that, especially if you write things down and really categorize them and look at them and say, hey, is this bothering me, or am I perfectly fine about it? I think that's a key. What if you have the opposite problem that I do? You don't have potentially too many hobbies, you have not enough. And by not enough, I mean you actually find yourself bored often during the week. It's really unfortunate to have that problem, and hopefully it doesn't lead you to actually have to go back to work because you're too bored. Heaven forbid. Maybe I can shed a little bit of light on the topic and help you. I don't actually have that problem, so I had to do some research and I took some notes. So forgive me if I'm looking down at my notes a little more than I usually do. But the first challenge is you got to come up with some ideas. What are the ideas? And one of the things I thought about is go back to when you were younger, before life got really busy. Maybe when you were 25, what interests did you have? What were the things that you really wanted to try or get into, but didn't have the resources to do it, either time or money? Well, you have both of those now, hopefully, especially the time, for sure the time. And so how do you find things to be interested in? If you can't find anything that way, I would say start asking around to people you know at church, your friends, your family. Start watching some YouTube videos. Get on the internet, do some Googling on things to try in retirement. Get into your community calendar at your local community center. Look for classes they won't have classes probably on what to do in retirement, but they will have classes on making things, different things. I just know from looking at them. I've never taken one of their classes before, but I do know there was a lot of classes that interested me, that if I didn't have so many other things to do, I'd probably do that. So when you have your list, I would say go down there and prioritize it and pick a couple things off your list that you say, that might be interesting. And I would say view it as an interest, not a commitment. Borrow gear, go take a class, try it before you buy anything. So you don't feel so bad about the fact that you invested all this time and money into it and you have nothing to show for it. If you're like me, learning might actually be the hobby. And maybe it is just learning new things, and keep on trying. And then eventually you'll stumble across something that you say, oh, I like this. And you find yourself probably looking back to say, oh, I thought that was an interest and it turned out to be a hobby, which is a nice thing to have happen. And I would say anything you do give a try, give yourself a real window. Don't go take one class and say, oh, I'm not interested in that. Because some things, interests/hobbies, take a bit before they click. They might be kind of hard to do at first. I know, for instance, the CNC, I mentioned before that it actually is a very complex machine. You have to get into this complex software, and it's fairly big time investment before you really are making anything to derive any pleasure from it. Unless again, I've probably said this 50 times, if you like the learning part. 3D printing, on the other hand, I think within 5 minutes of setting the machine up, we were printing something. Pretty impressive, I have to say, for Bamboo Labs. Maybe someday somebody will do that on a CNC. Not sure. Maybe there's other manufacturers who already did that. I also think about where a source of things to do is when things get slow for you, what are you actually doing? Are you just sitting there staring off into space? Are you reading? And can you invest deeper into the things you already are doing? I think that's a good source for some people as I talk to them. And I would say as well, maybe join something, join a club, whatever your interests are. Go to a local woodworking store, for instance. They have demo days. You can go take a class there. Lots of different ways to do it depending upon your interest. And if you are really stuck, drop me an email. I'll see if I can help you. And then I would say once something becomes a hobby, in order to avoid the problem of having too many hobbies, which maybe you may not have that problem if you're having the problem of finding anything, but give it the 1 year test. Once a year, for me, it's the end of the year, do sort of an assessment of everything that's been occupying all your time, and are you happy with where all your time's been going in the different categories of life. And then when you think about hobbies, do you have any hobbies that are in your abandoned list and you need to do something about it? Now, obviously, I did not do a very good job of looking at my hobbies at the end of the 2025, but I'm doing it now. So we'll come back to that. But I wish you well. I sure hope that you actually find something that interests you enough to where it can occupy a decent amount of your time. So, the answer to the question that got asked at the very beginning, how many hobbies do you actually have? 41, if you count the ones that have been dropped, the ones that are abandoned, the ones that are parked, and my active hobbies. That's a lot of hobbies. Honestly, it surprised the crap out of me. It for sure did. And as I mentioned earlier, or at least tried to mention earlier, my wife did the same thing, and she actually had 43. But I think it's down to how granular of a list you actually have. But can you have too many hobbies that cause you stress? I would say yes. One hobby that causes you stress is too many. And so the question is, can you have too many interests? I would say no, for sure not. Too many interests? I can't imagine that. My channel is called Curious Kicks for a reason. If you found any of this interesting and you enjoy watching me ramble on in front of my Milwaukee tool wall, talking to a camera and struggling to make a video, please stick around and there's more to come. Please like and subscribe. And for now, this is Steve and this Curious Kicks out.